All right, and hello, welcome to History Happy Hour, brought to you by Lehigh Valley Passport to History. I'm your host, George Wacker of Lehigh Valley with Love Media, and we're here today for another look at the history that makes the Lehigh Valley so special. Today, we'll be talking about the American Revolutionary War, the Henry gun-making family revolution, and reenacting with Adam Steffen of the Jacobsburg Historical Society. But first things first, Lehigh Valley Passport to History is a partnership of 28 and growing historic sites and resources in and around Pennsylvania's Lehigh and Northampton counties. The group aims to connect you with historical sites to see and things to do throughout our region. The History Happy Hour series that you're watching right now is designed to bring Valley history wherever you watch these things, along with a recommended drink from a local brewery or distillery, or today, something a little different. If you'd like more information about upcoming events, or if you're an organization that would like to join the group, visit the Passport to History website at lvhistory.org. You see it right there. And check out their Facebook and Instagram pages. Make sure you join them for Passport to History weekend on Saturday, August 15th and Sunday, August 16th for free admission, tours, activities, and participating sites. And before we get to our presentation with Adam Steffen, we want to bring in our drink sponsor, the Colony Meadery. Make sure I bring it up here. Greg Heller-Labelle of the Colony Meadery. Greg, nice to see you.
Hey, George. Good to see you.
How's it going?
Living the dream, man. Just trying to stay
Always.
safe.
So listen, I said we had local breweries and we had local distilleries, and you're something a little bit different. So can you tell us a little bit about what mead is, number one, and why it's a good drink for a history talk?
Sure. So mead is just alcohol made from honey. It's steeped in history. Some people call it humanity's oldest alcohol because you don't really need agriculture. The first time a beehive ever got flooded by rainwater, there was naturally occurring mead. So humans found it pretty early, started drinking it. And it was a great fit then for any culture that was a frontier culture like, pre-revolution America. When you didn't have a lot of access to other fermentable sugars, people made mead. Washington made mead. Jefferson, any home brewers around then, there would have been a lot of mead.
And you have two locations, correct? One in Allentown and one in Bethlehem?
Yeah, our meadery is in Allentown in an old Mack truck factory that's now a manufacturing incubator. And then we have a new tasting room in South Bethlehem, right on 3rd Street, 211 East 3rd.
And what can people expect when they go into the tasting room now? Are they able to do that, or can they buy it in other locations?
Yeah, you can buy our products in Wegmans. Is probably the easiest place that most people will be familiar with. Our locations are currently open for both indoor and outdoor. And as long as we're allowed to, we will be. If you do dine in, you got to buy a meal. We have some delightful grilled cheese sandwiches at one location, some vegan chili going on in Allentown. And you can do everything. You can do tasting flights, but you can also always buy bottles and cans to go at both locations. And both locations do have mead slushies going now that we've got the nice hot weather going.
Oops, and that is perfect for this type of weather, I was just going to say. So, Greg, awesome. Thank you so much. Everybody, head to colonymeadery.com to learn more about mead and where you can get it. Greg, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you very much.
Cheers, George. Have a good one.
All right, with a little bit of further ado, before we bring Adam Steffen, I want to talk a little bit about the Jacobsburg Historical Society, which manages and maintains the Henry family estate, part of the Boulton Historical Site on Bushkill Creek near Nazareth, PA. To find out more information and to go into a lot of history and to find more information about what Adam is going to talk about today, you can visit jacobsburghistory.com. And now, without further ado, I'd like to bring in Adam Steffen. Adam, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can. Adam, you are now full on screen, so everyone can see you in your period dress. And before we do get into your presentation here, I want to ask you two things. So, number one, you're at the Pennsylvania Long Rifle Museum now, right?
That is correct. I'm at the Pennsylvania Long Rifle Museum.
can you describe like what are some things that visitors of that museum can see when they visit?
On the Pennsylvania Long Rifle Museum, you can definitely see the artifacts through the Henry gun making time period, all the way from the American Revolution all the way to 1901. So there's a nice vast history in these two rooms. We also have a gift shop located below. But you can really get the sense of what the Henrys did and contributed to the United States.
And with yourself, you're a young man.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you yourself got into reenacting, and take me along that story? As you do that, we have a couple pictures I'm going to show over top. But if you could tell that story to everybody.
Absolutely. So when I was about 13 to 14 years of age, my grandfather was a huge enthusiast of history. So his name is Earl Van Norman Jr. And so one day he was like, "Oh, Adam, I want you to come to Valley Forge with me to do this reenactment." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Sure, no problem, Pop," because I've always went places with him. So he brought out these funny looking clothing. He dressed me up in this weird stuff, and it's like, "All right, well, how do you feel? How do you think you can go out into the cold and stand around the campfire and just, talk about history?" And I was like, "Well, this seems kind of boring." And then he hands me the Pennsylvania long rifle, and then he hands me a tomahawk, and he goes, "Well, how do you feel about it now?" And I was like, "Well, this seems a little bit more interesting," and that's how I really got started through him. He brought me into this hobby, so I've been doing it about 20 plus years.
And for you, it's obviously an interest in history, and you mentioned spending time with your grandfather. Is it also that too? There's a social element to reenacting as well.
Oh, absolutely. The reenacting community is a diverse community, and it's really fun to get involved into. Even if you just like hiking, hanging out with friends, it's really a tight community. We try to boost each other up. And also too, Jacobsburg Historical Society are doing that too. It's a great organization to be part of. It's almost like a second family. You get to know each other for years. I know some of these members that actually known me longer than I've known myself, probably through my grandfather, because I've been running around Jacobsburg since I was probably 2 years old, and that's what got me started onto this. Jacobsburg's like my second home. It's my backyard, and when my grandfather passed away, he actually made me promise to get re-involved into reenacting. So that's what I did. And now I'm the second vice president of Jacobsburg Historical Society, thankfully to the board and to the wonderful members here. And but yeah, reenacting is a great hobby to be into, and it's something that you can learn so many things. It's not just learning about clothing and about war. It's actually learning about the people that were involved in the American Revolution, and that's the story that I really want to tell about the people. It's not always about the battles and the wins and the losses. I mean, absolutely, that makes a huge factor into it. But the essence of the American Revolution is on how we developed as a culture and what started us to become what the country that we are now today.
Okay, well, I feel that you are qualified then to give this presentation. No, it's fascinating. It's really interesting to me, and I'm looking forward to listening to this. So, for the viewers at home, I will be taking care of the slides here, and I'm going to follow along as well. And Adam, Stefan, it is now all yours.
Okay, thank you very much. So obviously I'm here at the Bolton site that William Henry II helped fund through his sons, William Henry III and John Joseph Henry, who built the house across the street in 1832. So I'm going to talk about the grandfather, who is William Henry I. William Henry I was the grandfather of them all. He's the one that really kind of started the Henrys. So obviously he had a father and a son that came, but he's the one that really started this whole thing. So William Henry, you could probably write a book about this guy, and you can actually. There is a book out by Scott Paul Gordon, fantastic gentleman. But William Henry, he was a gunsmith early on in his life. And oddly enough, a lot of people, when they still think of William Henry, they think of him as a gunmaker. Well, he only really did that in his early years. When it started to become his mid to late years in life, he really started to become, he wanted to become more of a gentleman. So he went to London a few times. He met a couple of connections through his course of life, and some of those connections was he was at Braddock's defeat in the French and Indian War as an armorer. Um, so that helped him start getting into the upper echelon of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and that's where he's originally from. And then you fast forward a couple of years, and then he actually attends with General Forbes at one of the forts there during the French and Indian War, and he becomes more involved, and he gets a lot more involved in the hierarchy of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. He starts to become more of a merchant. He's getting a lot of money now. He's got ties with London. He's established as a gunsmith, and he wants to leave that behind. He wants to become a gentleman. And in the 18th century, a gentleman didn't work with his hands; he worked with his mind. So it was really hard for him to transition from a laborer to a politician, if you will. And he's got a really cool story. He moves on from that, and then eventually he actually served in the Continental Congress twice, from 1785 to 1786. He was very, 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 very well connected with the Indians. During one of his campaigns with Braddock, he actually met an Indian, and I believe the name is Kill Bill. And the family and him became very close. And actually, there's still a family that lives in Canada now, and they still go by the last name of Henry. So that's really cool on how he was at that time a man out of his picture to be with the natives and to be friendly terms with the natives. So that's a huge thing. And obviously, he was a patriot. He served in the American Revolution, not as an officer, though, because of his religious ties. He was a Moravian. So obviously, people from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania are pretty common with the Moravians and their nonviolent religious background. They served as churches in Bethlehem in the American Revolution. So Henry, what he did was he was a procurement officer. He actually gathered a lot of supplies, firearms, shoes, and all this stuff for the Continental Army. And that's why a lot of people get confused still thinking that he was a gunsmith, and actually when he was not. You really can't, the Congress is giving you money, so you can't take that money and make your own money. That's not good business. That's it. So he did that, and then he actually served as treasurer for Pennsylvania. And then I will end him there because he is such a great guy, but I could just go on about him forever. So if you want to go to, I believe it's Anne Henry. So this is actually perfect.
Yeah.
So Anne Henry, that's his wife. She is a beautiful woman. And the interesting thing, I really want to express Anne Henry because in the 18th century, you really don't hear about the female involvement. And I really wanted to touch on this because as much as William Henry was a patriot, he was a great, his son, John Joseph Henry, which I'll talk about a little bit later, he wanted to serve. And his mother actually gave him consent to serve in the Continental Army. And she actually furnished him and made his own rifle frock, his gaiter trousers. So she made his apparel, and he had an ash-colored rifle shirt. So she had to be a patriot, and she was a patriot. During when the British occupied Philadelphia, David Rittenhouse and Thomas Paine actually stayed in the house of William Henry and Anne Henry. And Anne Henry actually complained quite frequently about Thomas Paine not keeping good cleanliness and being overly lazy, where David Rittenhouse was attending his treasury business. And I think this kind of really set the par for Anne Henry, because when William Henry died, she took up his office as treasurer, and she served that for 5 years. And that's something that you never hear of in the 18th century. And I really want to applaud Anne Henry for serving for 5 years in the Lancaster Pennsylvania as treasurer. And that's something that you never hear about. So hats off to her. She was a huge patriot, and she was a great contribution to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and to Pennsylvania, and as a young Commonwealth as Pennsylvania was at that time, to be doing that. And she transferred thousands and almost millions of dollars between Lancaster and Philadelphia and Pennsylvania itself. So there's a couple letters actually from David Rittenhouse to Anne Henry. So moving on to, I believe it's John Henry's, the next slide here that I have here. Yep, so John Henry. So unfortunately, we really don't know too much about John Henry, which is a real shame because this gentleman, well, I'll get to it. So John Henry, he grew up, he was the younger brother of William Henry. He was also in the gun making business. He actually went to Detroit for a while with John Joseph Henry, who was William Henry's the son. They love to use the same names in his family, so it's kind of hard to keep up. But anyhow, so John Henry, he was a good man. He was a hard man, and he actually served with the Patriots. He died in 1777, and it's quite interesting, actually. The only reason why we really know about John Henry is about a letter that his granddaughter or his daughter wrote to one of the family members about talking about her father being in the service and how he was a captain and the commander of one of the Lancaster militias. And the sad thing about John Henry is he unfortunately didn't live long enough to see the country win its independence. He, as I said, he died in 77 as a camp fever. So it's a real shame, but he was one of the people that paid the ultimate sacrifice to have America's freedom as it is. But he has a really interesting quote that he actually said to his wife. His wife writes to him, and she says, "John Henry, why do you give all your work and yourself to this cause?" And John Henry replies, "What we gain is our freedom. Payday will come later." He actually says liberty. He doesn't say freedom. He says we'll gain our liberty and payday will come later. And I think that's a really powerful statement. You know, we've always heard the coin phrases of join and die, or join or die, sorry, and liberty or death. But here's a guy right here in Lancaster that has a pretty awesome quote. And so I really wanted to throw that out there because you really don't hear about him too much, actually, at all. So he's a really interesting character. And then I believe the next slide is William Henry II. No, I'm wrong. So, okay, you can see.
I have John J. Henry.
John J. Henry. All right. So, yeah, John J. Henry. So, yeah, that guy. So, interesting thing about that gentleman, he looks pretty intimidating just looking at him in his portrait.
He looks a little grumpy.
Yeah, he does. And he has a really good reason for it. This man is a huge patriot. Like I said before, he came back from Detroit with his uncle, John Henry. His father kind of wanted him to be a Pennsylvania long rifle maker, but he didn't want that. He actually wanted to get involved in the Patriot War. He wanted to be a patriot, obviously. And he actually, this gentleman right here, served under Benedict Arnold before he became a traitor. He did the trial and long journey, I think 240 miles up to Quebec, Canada. And through that, he suffered a lot of hardships, ill-prepared weather, the cold, going through the river. It was actually called the Dead River for a very good reason. He actually lost a lieutenant in one of the boats. He lost his Pennsylvania long rifle, getting caught in one of the currents. He almost drowned and died. But he made it to the shore, and one of the other guys that unfortunately was too ill and had to retire home, he gave him his gun. So there was a lot of hardships that this gentleman went through. And then obviously he went to Quebec, and then he fought in the battle. There was a couple of mentions in his book on how a couple musket balls whisked around his head, and he almost got killed. Seen his friends die. He's seen a butcher of one of the generals up there. So, I mean, this man really had a lot of hardships. So then he got captured and he was in prison. And he did prison time with Daniel Morgan, who was a great general. He came to be one of the greatest generals in Virginia, one of the riflemen. And actually, if he didn't have suffered injuries, he actually would have been a captain of of one of General Morgan's campaigns. But he unfortunately came down with modern day gout and a couple of other things. So he settled in law. So he actually studied law. He met his wife, had a couple children, and then he eventually died in 1812, I believe. I have it on there, or 1811. Sorry, I was off by 1 year. He died in 1811. No, that's okay. He died in 1811, and so obviously he didn't see the War of 1812, but he served as Easton. And that's why we want to talk about the Lehigh Valley. So he served as Easton District Judge for a couple of things, and he had a couple of trials too. That actually, one of his trials actually got involved with John Adams when he became president. So it was really, this gentleman's a really interesting guy. He's actually got a book out. It's called The Accounts of Arnold's Campaign Against Quebec. You can look that up on Amazon. It's a fantastic book. Just make sure you get that one. There's a couple of different versions, but that's the actual face mail. So that's the original copy. So that gentleman went through a lot. And then finally, we have William Henry II, who is the second son of William Henry I, obviously. Like I said, this family loves to use their names. Now, this gentleman, he was a gunsmith that was involved in the American Revolution. He did make firearms for the American Revolution. I believe he was quoted to make 65 muskets, which obviously to you and I, that doesn't sound like a lot. You're like, oh, 65 muskets, what's the big deal? But roughly around that time period, it took about 1,800 hours almost just to complete from lock, stock, and barrel to complete a full-on functional musket. And if you could, I don't know if you can actually see behind me, but I have that.
Yeah, we can see. Yeah, that's. Yeah. I don't know how to do the math, but that's a long time.
Yeah, that's a long time. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously they got a little bit more in hand. They had some factories that help them along with the forging and stuff like that, the shapes of the barrels and the locks and stuff like that. But during the 18th century, you're looking roughly around that time period to making a fully functional musket. And then you have to test it. And if it doesn't pass the test, then you did all that work for nothing. But yeah, anyhow, so this gentleman, he did a couple of little things. I shouldn't say little, he did a lot. So he made firearms, and that's what his whole life was. He was a gunsmith his entire life, from start to finish. And this is the gentleman that grew up and settled in Nazareth. He actually had a gunsmith shop right there on Main Street in Nazareth, Pennsylvania. And then he was actually the the original sponsor or founder of Jacobsburg Historical Society, where we sit right now, where I'm actually in the Pennsylvania Long Rifle Museum. That was his son's house, William Henry III, who helped establish this area. And then eventually, John Joseph Henry bought his own brother out. And William Henry III, he kind of went out and did his own thing. But John Joseph Henry, who is not our guy that we're talking about in the American Revolution, he's a different guy.
There's a lot of Johns and Henrys.
There's a lot of Johns.
I don't know how you keep them all together.
It's pretty hard, believe me. Believe me, it gets very hard. So, but yeah, he's the one that helped found this site and make this whole thing possible through the Henrys. So I kind of gave you like a really brief runaround of just some of the Henrys, because I know we're on a time limit here, so I kind of just really want to tail into. So here at Jacobsburg Historical Society, September 12th and 13th of this year, we're going to have an American Revolution event, and hopefully, if we're still in the green phase, so that way we can still have the event. And all our details are on that website. Also, I think 2 weekends from now, August 15th and 16th, you said the Passport to History, our site will be open as well to the public and free admission.
And for somebody who, maybe they're tuning in for the first time, and they've never done something like this, or they've never gone to a historical society. What would happen if would there be open tours? Are you free to go over the grounds? Are there going to be tour guides, that sort of thing?
So when you come to Jacobsburg Historical Society, it's a little different for each event.
Okay.
When you come here for the Passport of History, it's kind of like you're your own tour guide. You come in through our back by the 1832 house through our cast center, and our Nicholas Hawk shop is there, which is great story about him. He's one of the best Pennsylvania long rifle makers. So you can go there. There's normally a docent in there, and they talk about history, and that's normally me. And then you can go through our 1832 house, which is an absolutely beautiful house. It's actually a Philadelphia townhouse built right here in the middle of nowhere in Nazareth. He actually built that for his house for his wife. And then they did some add-ons during the late years. But it's left in the Victorian style. So anybody that's a huge Victorian style person, I really highly recommend that you check out the house. And there's several lovely ladies that run that museum that do a fantastic job of doing docing, and then they change the decorations upon the seasons. They just do a really beautiful job. They have beautiful mannequins of all the original outfits that the Henrys wore. So for ladies that are in fashion, they have beautiful gowns that are there. And then
so this is interesting. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm actually reading through with the Revolutionary War encampments, and then also the World War II Living History Weekend. Yep. I've never been to one of those. So what? Do people come who aren't participating? Like, would I come and kind of watch it? So that's the idea. Like, it's you're seeing what would have happened. Yeah, it sounds fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. So our American Revolutionary War event this year is going to be a little different. We're actually going to have the British side, and we're going to have the continental side. So we're actually going to have a battle during the day, so you can come and see what a skirmish would have looked like. We call it military tactics, what a skirmish would have looked like back in the 18th century, and how much of a gentleman's war that we were. So you're fully. It's almost like you get out of your car and you're in the 18th century. So it's kind of like you traveled back. You got into the with Doc and Marty McFly, and you went in the DeLorean. You went to 88 miles an hour, and you came back, and boom, you're in the 18th century. So that's what it's like. So it's really neat. I hope that the younger generation gets that Back to the Future reference.
They should. Even that. Maybe that's a part of history now. That
is a part of history.
I'll be the person for that one when they're doing the Back to History tours. I will give those. I think I have the clothes for it. Hey, Adam, this was a pleasure. Thank you so much. I hope that we're able to do some more in the future.
Absolutely.
You gave, usually this is the time when I would tell everybody all that information, but you already gave it. So
sorry.
I want to make sure. No, it's totally okay. You did my job for me. I'm more than happy. I want to remind people, make sure that you go to Jacobsburghistory.com. That's where you're going to find all of the information and about upcoming events, and be sure to visit lvhistory.org to find out more information about this Lehigh Valley Passport to History and also the upcoming weekend. Make sure you visit colonymeadery.com to learn more, or learn where you can purchase some meads from those guys. I know, Adam, you're a fan of mead.
I am. Right? Actually, I will tell you, this is the only time that you will see a patriot drinking the tea packs.
Hold that up there. Can you hold it up to camera? There, see?
Yep.
And that's tea
This is the only time you'll see a patriot drinking the tea packs.
And
the rest is in Boston Harbor.
That's a Colony Meadery mead.
Yep. Yes, it is. And it's delicious.
I don't know if that could be a better endorsement. It's like the Pepsi guy. So, yeah. So, hey, Adam, thanks again. Oh, get out of here.
Thank you.
So, yeah, thanks again. That was a pleasure. Thank you to everybody who was watching. I'm looking forward to going to the reenactment. And I want to thank everybody at LV Passport to History. Again, go to lvhistory.org and jacobsburghistory.com. I'm George with Lehigh Valley with Love Media, and we will see you next week. Thank you very much.
Huzzah.